All right, hi everybody. My name is Jeff Epstein, and this is an introduction to modern monetary theory, MMT.
Serious, Candy, about the debt.
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
Okay, so I want to thank Jeff Ginter for putting that together for me. Everything you heard in that video should be very familiar to you. You should have heard these things, you've probably heard these things your entire life. But by the end of this presentation, I hope that you will begin to understand why pretty much everything said by all of those important people is completely wrong. So mainstream economics says that big things are not possible. Not without causing economic Armageddon. Modern monetary theory demonstrates that big things are possible. They are possible right now. They are already possible, and they have always been possible. And it is possible to do without causing economic problems. Therefore, many important things that most of us know about money is completely wrong. And not just wrong, but wrong in a way that ensures that the wealthy few remain the wealthy few. So, I would like to thank first for helping me improve this presentation Virginia Kotz, James Field Martinez, Aaron Taylor, Ben Siley, and Esha Krishnaswamy, among others. And I especially want to thank MMT economist Stephen Hale for helping me to ensure the accuracy of this presentation. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with an open mind. I do know what I'm talking about, but I am encouraging you that when we are done, be skeptical, do your homework, and decide the truth for yourself. Please put your questions into the comments, and at the end I will answer all of them to the best of my ability or point you to people that can better handle them. But most of your questions will very likely be answered by the presentation. MMT is easy, it's simple, and it's elegant. The only thing that is difficult is letting go of your lifetime of miseducation. MMT is a school of economic thought based on the ideas of Warren Mosler, who took many ideas, some of which have been around for more than 100 years, brought them back, mixed them up, and now it is modern monetary theory, which is backed by 25 years of research and scholarship, developed by these economists and experts, among others. Most of these people you will find on Twitter, and more than happy to answer your questions if you do a minimal amount of homework, and all of them will confirm what you hear me say tonight. I am not an expert. I discovered MMT in February of last year. What I'm good at, what I can do, is I can introduce the basics of modern monetary theory as I learned them from the economists. But once your eyes are open to MMT, it is time for you to move on to the experts in order to learn more. So here are some important works that MMT is based upon and that this presentation is based upon. So we have Modern Money Theory, the 2015 book, second edition, by economist Randall Wray. We have Economics for Sustainable Prosperity by economist Stephen Hale. And we have the now authoritative textbook, the 2019, published in 2019 by Bill Mitchell, Randall Wray, and Martin Watts. And also some important articles that you can read, and I will put a link to the full slide deck into the comments when I'm done. So first, what is money? What gives it value, and where does it come from? The money story begins with a government that needs to provision itself. So the government needs things to be done, and since we define the government, we collectively are the government. So we need these things to be done. We need to be defended. We need rule of law. We need infrastructure. We need to take cool inventions and scale them up for bigger purposes. We need to gather intelligence. We need to care for the people, and many other things. The government needs things to be done with the resources that we have. And we, the people, sell our productivity and our services to the government, and they give us their money in exchange, in return, as incentive for doing so. So money has value because it is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. And that's true. But more specifically, money has value because if we do not pay federal taxes with the money that the government gave us, then we have faith that there will be severe consequences. Because of this, you must get a job in order to get their money, in order to pay your federal taxes with their money, in order to avoid those penalties. In other words, federal taxes create unemployment. Federal taxes drive money. They force the people to need to use the government's money, and they also establish and legitimize the currency. The government doesn't need our money. We need their money, and the government needs us to need their money. And notice the order of operations. You cannot pay your federal taxes until you get money from the government. So like a paycheck from our job, you do what the government asks you to do, and they pay you with their money. And after taxes, the money is yours to keep. You could, with no strings attached. You owe it to nobody. You could do whatever you like with it. It is debt-free. That's important. Debt-free. So, in 1971, the United States, along with many other currencies, went off of the gold standard and became fiat currencies. Fiat just means the money is not backed by anything physical. So I'm going to answer this specifically for the United States, but many countries have something similar to this. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution of the United States defines the powers of Congress. Two of those powers are to coin money and to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting. To coin money. To coin means to create, as in to coin a phrase. This means that Congress can create all kinds of money, paper bills, metallic coins, anything else. Who creates the United States dollar? And the answer to this is the central bank. In the United States, the central bank is called the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve doesn't just create money because they want to create money. They only do it when they are commanded to do so by the Treasury. The Treasury only does it when they are commanded to do so by a law that the president signed and after the federal budget is passed. The law that the president signed was originally a bill written by Congress. And in our corrupt system, Congress is under the influence of big money lobbyists and donors. So who creates the United States dollar? The answer is the central bank. But who authorizes the creation of the United States dollar? The answer is Congress. So, what's going on? Excuse me. So, Congress has the power to create money and to punish anyone else who tries to create money. This means that Congress is the monopoly currency issuer, the only one allowed to authorize or appropriate the United States dollar. Here's an example bill proposed by Elizabeth Warren and others regarding the opioid epidemic. This screenshot is from last year. This section of the bill is called the Authorization of Appropriations. $2 billion, $700 million for fiscal year 2019. Same amount for 2020, 2021, and so on. That is the amount of money that is authorized to be created after this bill becomes law and after the federal budget is passed. That is the amount created because that is the number that was typed into this document using a computer, with a finger on a keyboard on a computer. That is the amount that the authors of this bill believe that is necessary to purchase the resources that are necessary to implement this bill. Everyone except the currency issuer, and I'll say more broadly the federal government, is a user of the United States dollar. Me and you, our families, our companies, our municipalities, and our cities and towns and states that we live in, and even other countries. When it comes to the United States dollar, China and Russia are users of the currency. We are all currency users. We are all in the same position. The only difference is the amount that we have. And finally, all money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. Even if you work at a company that does no business with the government, such as a grocery store or a restaurant, another company does do business with the government. They have a contract, they do what they're supposed to do, and then the government gives them money. That company uses that money to pay their employees, and then their employees go shopping. One of their employees goes to a restaurant, gives a big tip to a waitress, and then that waitress goes to your grocery store, and then your grocery store pays you with that money. All money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. So that's where money comes from. Now let's talk about how money is created and how it moves its way through the economy. This is done by a process called reserve accounting. So you have a calculator, and you have 900 on that calculator. And you want to add 100 to it so you can get 1,000. So my question to you is, where does that 100 come from? Do you need to find it? Do you need to borrow it from another calculator? Do you need to pay for it? When you press 100, it is. It is as if you are the god of numbers on that calculator. And for the currency issuer, that is pretty much how they create their own money. The currency issuer creates money when they will it to be. And for the issuer only, the word spend is exactly equal to the word create. They spend money into the economy. They spend money into existence. They emit money into the economy. And think about it. If you had absolutely no money, not in your bank account, not in your wallet, nothing, but you were granted the power to create money whenever you needed it. Now, you can't keep it. You're not allowed to keep it. You can only give it to somebody else. You can only spend it. But if you had this power, does it really matter that you have no money? So reserve accounting occurs at a country's central bank. How is the central bank relevant to me and you? So I have a bank account at my local branch of Wells Fargo in my town on Fork Landing Road, along with many other individuals and local businesses. There are branches of Wells Fargo all around the country. And all of those branches with all of their customers and all of their bank accounts are all managed by Wells Fargo Corporate. Wells Fargo itself has a bank account at the central bank. And Wells Fargo has about $600 billion in their bank account. And that is a significant percentage of all of the bank accounts in all of their local branches throughout this country. Every bank in the United States has a bank account at the central bank. And more accurately, it's a spreadsheet. 2 columns. The name of the bank, how much they have. So I have $1,000 in my bank account at my local bank. My bank has $600 billion in their reserve account or their reserves at the central bank. So the central bank is the bank of the banks. It's also the top bank. There is no Earth Bank, there's no Universe Bank. The central bank is the topmost bank that creates that country's currency. So we're going to do 3 examples of reserve accounting. One where money is created, one where money is destroyed, and one where money is transferred. Example number 1. How does Grandmom get $300 in Social Security benefits from the government? How does this work? So the Social Security Administration determines Grandmom is due $300. They communicate that to the central bank, and then the central bank communicates that to Grandmom's bank, and then this is what happens. Grandmom's bank, their reserves are increased by $300. And then Grandmom's bank account is increased by $300. And that's it. This is called marking up an account. Money is created because a number was made bigger. All on a computer, with your finger, on a keyboard, on a computer, and in today's technology, on the internet. Example number 2, destroying money. This time we're starting over again. Grandmom now owes $100 in federal taxes. How does this work? And this is exactly opposite of the first example. So grandmom sends in her tax return and her $100 check to the IRS. The IRS communicates that to the central bank communicates that to grandmom's bank, and then this is what happens. Grandmom's bank, their reserves are reduced by $100, and then grandmom's bank account is reduced by $100. And that's it. That is called marking down an account. When numbers are made smaller, money dies or is destroyed or disappears. When numbers are made bigger, money is created or born. Here is Ben Bernanke. He was the chairman of the Federal Reserve during the Great Recession of 2008.
Commitments of $1 trillion, doubling the size of the Fed's balance sheet.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
To lend to a bank, we simply use a computer to mark up the size of the account that they have at the Fed. And when he says not exactly the same, he just means that it's done on a computer and not physical money. What happens when money is destroyed or dies? A child draws a bill onto a piece of construction paper, money's created. They erase that bill. What happened to that money? Where did it go? At the end of a game, a scoreboard is lowered back down to 0. What happened to those points? Where did they go? You have a calculator with 1,000 on it, and now you minus 100 from it, so now you have 900. Where did that 100 go? And the answer is, it didn't go anywhere because it never existed in the first place. To currency users, money is real. To the currency issuer, money is not real. It's a concept. Last example, transferring money. So now my company gives me a paper paycheck, and we have two separate banks. And this is the first two examples put together. So I get a paper paycheck from my company, I give it to my bank. My bank says you will have this money in about 24 hours. They communicate that check to the central bank, and then this is what happens. My company's bank account is reduced by $100. Their bank's reserves are reduced by $100. Now on my side, my bank's reserves are increased by $100. And then my bank account is increased by $100. No money was taken from my company, picked up, and moved over and put into my bank account. That's not how it works. Money was destroyed in my company's bank and then created in my bank. This is reserve accounting. This is how money moves from one bank's reserves to another. $5 trillion moves through the central banking system in the United States, the Federal Reserve System, every single day, which is about $2 quadrillion a year. Next chapter, created currency. Economist Stephanie Kelton in the 1990s. Stephanie Kelton is now Bernie Sanders' chief economic advisor on both his 2020 and was also on his 2016 campaign. In the 1990s, Stephanie Kelton discovered Warren Mosler's ideas, and she initially thought that he was wrong. And so she set out to prove him wrong. And in the course of trying to do so, she ended up proving him right. This is the result of that research. 1998 paper called Can Taxes and Bonds Finance Government Spending? This is most of the abstract. We're going to focus on just one sentence right now. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Another way of saying that is, every dollar of federal spending is and has always been financed with created currency. Every federal benefit, every time it's paid. Every federal program and agency. Every federal salary, every paycheck that has ever been received by a federal employee. The military is a federal program. The salary of every military personnel and every piece of equipment is and has always been financed with created currency. And yet we often hear, I don't want my taxes paying for war. I want them paying for healthcare and education. But the military is a federal program. So how does that make sense? And we also hear, I don't want my taxes paying for your big programs. But if it is a federal program, then how does that make sense? Social Security is a federal program. Every Social Security benefit that has ever been paid since the law was passed in 1935 has been financed with created currency. And since that is true, because it is true, how can Social Security ever go broke or be stolen from or be borrowed from? And the same is true with all federal benefits. How can its funds ever be squandered? And why would it ever need to save today in order to pay benefits tomorrow? And finally, why do we pay FICA taxes? Next chapter. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. And it's not just a cute statement. It is precisely true. And remember the order of operations. You cannot pay your taxes until you get money from the government. Same abstract, this time a different sentence. It is argued that the proceeds from taxation and bond sales are technically incapable of financing government spending. And when she says technically incapable, she means impossible. Economist Pavlina Cherneva. Taxes are not stockpiled in any material sense for future respending. Economist Randall Wray. If government spends and lends currency into existence, it clearly does not need tax revenue before it can spend. Stephanie Kelton, same paper, in the same paper. Taxes are not even capable of financing government spending, since their collection implies their destruction. and destroyed in the same way as the 100 in our subtraction problem. All federal spending is financed with created currency, which logically extends that federal taxes do not pay for anything. And during the heart of the Great Depression, that is exactly when we paid for two of the most ambitious programs in our country's history, World War II and FDR's New Deal. Federal taxes do not pay for anything because all federal spending is financed with created currency, which is proven by the realities of reserve accounting. And that is exactly the purpose of Stephanie Kelton's paper. Here is the entire abstract. And notice the sentences that come right before the couple that we just spoke about. After carefully considering the complexities of reserve accounting, these are the conclusions that we draw. Next chapter. Since federal taxes do not pay for anything, then why do we pay federal taxes? Federal taxes drive money. They make the people need the money. Federal taxes are also one of many tools to control inflation. We can raise taxes to reduce demand, or we can lower taxes to increase demand. Federal taxes can impose moral decisions. We can raise taxes to discourage behavior. We can lower taxes to encourage behavior. For example, we can tax the rich to discourage wealth inequality. We need to tax the rich because they are too damn rich. They profit off of our suffering. They purchase our politicians and our laws, and they are destroying our ability to live on the planet. Taxing the rich reduces their power, which immediately increases our power. We need to tax the rich because it is the moral and right thing to do, not because we need their money. Here is a diagram graph showing the personal wealth of our members of Congress. 535 members total, and the yellow, 37 members of Congress have a personal wealth in the bottom 80% of the United States. 80% of America is 260 million people, and they are represented by 7% of Congress. Next chapter, the Pony for All Act of 2018. Hillary Clinton said to Bernie Sanders in her book regarding the 2016 campaign, "It's so nice that you want to give everybody a pony, Bernie. Everybody would love a pony, but how are you going to pay for it?" So I want to do a thought experiment. Let's write the Pony for All Act and give every citizen a free pony if they want one, because it can be done. If not for literally every citizen, it can certainly be done to a very large scale. So what would it take? The first step is understanding our current situation. We can't know where we are going if we don't know where we've been. As an example, we'll use the United States. We have about 320 million people, and we have about 500,000 ponies. This is clearly not going to work. Demand far outstrips supply. We must make these roughly equal. The Pony for All Act, by design, is for all. So we don't want to decrease demand in this case. We must increase supply. How do we do that? How do we increase 500,000 ponies to be 320 million ponies? Although we have many options, given our current state of science and technology, and given the scale that we need to do this, the only practical solution is to reproduce. Mommy and daddy ponies are going to have to do their thing over and over and over again. Another question we have to answer is, how long will it take? And in order to answer that, we must understand the biological realities of ponies. How many are there currently? What is their gestation period? How long after giving birth can a mommy do her thing again? What is the minimum age to give birth, and what is their mortality rate? Given our current situation, given these biological realities, we determine it's going to take about 20 years. Now, we've been taking care of 500,000 ponies, no problem, but now the population is exploding. And this has enormous consequences. It means that we will need a lot more supplies. It means that we will need to educate millions more people to help us develop and maintain this program. It means that we will need to distribute these things all around the country. So the Pony for All Act will create an entire new industry with good new jobs. And this is an excellent side benefit. We have a much more important thing that we are trying to get at. Now it's 20 years later, and we now have 320 million ponies, and it is time for the people to pick them up. They go to Ponies R Us, and it's perfectly organized. We have the best staff. That's not what we're talking about right now. But the people do not know how to take care of ponies, so we need to train them. Their homes are not prepared to handle ponies, so we need to prepare them. And so all of the supplies and services and labor that we just discussed is now needed by everybody. And finally, with 320 million, it really is an important question. What happens when they die? So it takes 20 years, and this is the full life cycle. This is what goes into our bill. And notice that we have not said a word about money. But now that we know the resources that it will take to make this happen, as a final step, we can now determine the cost to purchase those resources and add those numbers, that amount, to the section of our bill called the Authorization of Appropriations. But let's say that there is some powerful person that says that 20 years is unacceptable. I will make my little girl wait 5 years, but I will not make her wait 20 years. You will make this happen. I do not care what it takes. So what are our options? We could make it the law, we could threaten severe consequences, and we could throw money at it. $10 trillion, whatever it takes. So the question is if we force it to happen faster, what happens? And the answer is nothing. Nothing happens, because forcing it to happen faster, it simply doesn't work. No amount of money can change biological processes. No amount of money can change how quickly we can educate people or how fast we can distribute these things around the country, or how long it takes to train our citizens or to prepare their homes. This is what's important. To the currency issuer, the only thing that matters is real resources, not money. Because the reason is to us currency users, money is real. To the currency issuer, money is not real. They can create it out of thin air at will. If the resources are available, then creating the money to purchase them is not inflationary. If you have the resources to do it, do it. And if you don't, don't. And when I say resources, I mean real, tangible stuff. Raw materials, labor, technology, and time. Because even if you have the stuff, you need time to make it happen. So nothing can make the Pony for All Act happen in less than 20 years. The realities of real resources are outside of human control. Money and rules are human-created concepts. How many rules there are and how good those rules are don't matter. Because when it comes down to it, there is no way to guarantee that humans will follow human-created rules. But no matter how corrupt an individual is or how corrupt an organization is, the realities, the limitations of real resources can never be violated. So as silly as it is, as resource intensive as it is, we can actually give every citizen a free pony. So why in the world can we not give them universal health care and college? And especially since there are almost no resources involved in, directly speaking, in doing so, why can't we cancel student debt? This is Alan Greenspan. He was the predecessor to Ben Bernanke on the Federal Reserve. And here he is in congressional testimony, meaning under oath, talking with Paul Ryan, the former Speaker of the House, on the subject of Social Security. And he is going to confirm the conclusion that we just came up with in our thought experiment.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created which those benefits are employed to purchase? So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul Ryan regrets asking this question because he was hoping that Alan Greenspan was going to say, yes, it makes economic sense for you to privatize healthcare and please your donors. It's not a question of economic security. It's a question that the real resources are created for retirement so that you can purchase the real resources with benefits, which is money. So in his verbose way, he came to the same conclusion that we just came to in our thought experiment. To the currency issuer, the only thing that matters, because it is the only thing that is real resources, not money. Generally speaking, senior citizens and all people don't need money. They need the things that they can purchase with that money. Next chapter, the federal deficit. The federal deficit is the amount of money that the federal government spends into the economy minus the taxes that they collect back. So for example, the federal government spends $3 trillion this year, in one year. They spend $3 trillion, they tax back $1.7 trillion, so what is left, what remains, is $1.3 trillion. This is the amount that is left in the economy, left in the people's pockets. Too much spending, a ballooning deficit, is not the problem. The only thing that matters is what our governments do and don't do, and who they do it for and who they don't do it for. And is it funneled to the wealthy few? Is it withheld from the millions who desperately need it? What matters is their spending moral and just and equitable and efficient? The problem is not too much spending. The problem is income inequality and poverty and suicide and involuntary unemployment and climate change and many other things. That's reality. What the government does is more important than what's left over. The federal deficit is like our federal paycheck. It really is and should be called our national income. So when you hear a very important person say, it is urgent that we reduce the deficit, what they are saying, whether they know it or not, is that it is urgent that we stop giving the people money. Next chapter, the national debt. So you and I, currency users, we require income. If we don't get it from the government, we must get it from somebody else. An example is a bank loan. We go to a bank and we ask for, say, $1,000. The bank analyzes our histories, analyzes our net worth, and then they decide, are they likely to pay it back? And if they think that we are, then they give us the money. When we get that money, we are instantly in debt to that bank for $1,000 plus interest. We are in debt to a for-profit private corporation. And this kind of debt is scary because this bank, the bank will do whatever it takes to get their money back. This is called private debt, where the government is public and everything else, everyone else, is private. a bank loan for a currency user. There is no equivalent for the currency issuer. There is no bank above the currency issuer. The central bank, the Federal Reserve in the United States, must do as Congress commands it to do. Once again, here's Alan Greenspan.
Are U.S. Treasury bonds still safe to invest in?
Very much so. I think this is not an issue of credit rating. The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there is zero probability of default.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always create money on a computer to do it. There is zero probability of default. He didn't say low probability. He didn't say remote probability. He said zero probability. As long as the government exists, it is impossible for them to not be able to pay its bills. Currency issuers like the United States do not have a debt. They just don't. Not in any way that means a debt like a debt does to me and you as currency users. But, practically speaking, this is what the national debt is. It is the sum total, the accumulation of every federal paycheck since the country began. What we used to call every federal paycheck, what we used to call every federal deficit. So in the United States, the first dollar was created in 1796, and every dollar spent into the economy since then that has not yet been taxed back is the national debt. The national debt is the debt-free savings of every citizen. Literally the money in our bank accounts, investments, and wallets. And savings means debt-free. Like a paycheck from our job. We do what's asked, they pay us, and after taxes, we get to keep that money. We owe it to nobody, no strings attached. The national debt is, and really should be called, our national savings. The national savings is our wealth. The problem is never too much wealth. The problem is wealth inequality. Who has too much of it? Who doesn't have enough of it? And the real national debt that really will bankrupt our grandchildren has nothing to do with money. Next chapter, inflation. So those who don't understand MMT or don't want you to understand MMT will say things like the following. Creating money causes inflation. And creating more than that causes hyperinflation. So if you create $1, it will cause inflation. And if you create the second dollar, it will cause hyperinflation. The idea that creating money causes inflation is as ridiculous as the idea that birth causes crime. All criminals are born. Most of us incorrectly believe that inflation is what is actually called hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is genuinely out of control inflation. And in an economy such as the United States, hyperinflation is not just unlikely, it's absurd. Prices going up is not inflation. And it may not even be a bad thing. If you have $20,000 in debt, is that a bad thing? Not if you have $50,000 in assets. Because that means you have a $30,000 net worth. You need the full picture before you can draw conclusions. Prices going up may not be a bad thing if your wages are going right up along with prices. It also may not be a bad thing if your wages are going up even faster than prices. Prices going up are a bad thing if your wages are artificially low, if they are stagnant or being suppressed. Prices going up is a bad thing if, Prices going up is a bad thing if they are going up artificially high, faster than your wages. And an example of this is the price gouging pharmaceutical industry, price gouging Americans, and our government does nothing to stop it. Prices going up is a good thing if it goes up on something that harms our society, such as activities that cause climate change. The point is that inflation, the boogeyman, is totally different than inflation in reality. There are many tools to prevent, measure, and respond to inflation. And many of these tools can be automated in order to bypass our fickle and corrupt politicians. If you want to start to understand inflation in reality, this is a wonderful article, first article to read. And again, I will put the link to these slides into the comments when we're done. Economies such as the United States do not need to raise taxes for the purposes of revenue. And they also have an abundance of resources. And because of these two things, they can indeed provide for all of their people without causing substantial inflation. And when I say provide, I do not mean luxury. I mean provide basic human needs. In fact, all of these programs don't just cost. They also add money to local economies and therefore more than pay for themselves. Not to mention all of the non-financial benefits, which are in fact by far the most important of all, such as not going bankrupt when you go to the doctor. Here is inflation in the United States since 1960. The only substantial inflation that we have experienced in this country were the two OPEC oil shocks during the 1970s. OPEC deliberately withheld its product in retaliation for our support of Israel, and that, coupled with our misguided decision to make our society so dependent on that one product, that caused big problems. Aside from that, no substantial inflation has occurred in the United States in the past 60 years, even though during that entire time, every dollar of federal spending was financed with created currency. And finally, just in 2018 alone, $100 trillion in United States treasuries matured or paid back. No inflation. Next chapter. Now, that's pretty much MMT. Now, after learning MMT for a year and a half and then looking at our society again and looking at our government again, these are the conclusions that I draw. So much of what I'm about to say comes from me, not MMT. First, let's watch the video that we watched at the very beginning, and I hope that you will begin to see some red flags.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
Okay, so are they lying? Do they just not know better? As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter, because I give benefit of the doubt to the powerless. I will not give benefit of the doubt to the powerful, who personally benefit off of the powerless remaining ignorant about how the economy works. Our federal representatives tell us that they can't give us what they need, even though they really want to, because not even preventing our suffering in reality is more important than their made-up fiscal responsibility. Our governments have an abundance of resources, but they withhold it from the people because they're legally bribed to do it. The people are therefore left to fight over the scraps, creating behavior such as this. Please take a moment to read that. I deserve more than you. Not because society is unjust and we're all doing the best we can in a really terrible situation. No, I deserve more than you because you are less than me. You are less than me. And while this behavior is disgusting, what's really disgraceful is the system that allows it to happen. Our government allows their people to fight over the scraps, even though they have more than enough to provide for all. They shame and punish their people for making bad decisions, even though they could easily prevent us from having to face that decision in the first place. Our governments manufacture scarcity. And because of this, we have to be terrible to each other, to our families, to ourselves, to the environment, just to survive. So our government will not provide for us, so who's left but for-profit private corporations? We are forced into private debt. Our lives are placed on the altar of their profit. They legally bribe our politicians so they can legally steal from us. Our federal representatives quietly take money from these for-profit monsters, then look the other way and shrug helplessly while the monsters prey upon us. So all of these industries, but most of all, the fossil fuel industry, they've known since around 1950 that they're not just killing a few million here and a few million there. No, they're threatening the entire species for $1. If you remember nothing else, please remember that a currency issuer is totally different than a currency user. Currency users do have to worry about money. We do have to worry about bills and debt collectors and bankruptcy, and we do have to worry what will happen if we can't afford to pay our bills. For us, fiscal responsibility is critical. For us, private debt can be ruinous. Currency issuers have a lot of things that they need to worry about, but not money. Fiscal responsibility for a currency issuer is nonsensical. Public debt is nothing. How are you going to pay for it? And the answer is with money. Congressional appropriations. Here is the technically correct answer to how are you going to pay for it? Every federal program is paid for with congressional appropriations. We are a sovereign fiat currency. If we have the real resources to do it, then you can choose to create money to purchase those resources to do it. But this is the answer that I believe should be given to this terrible question. We will pay for it by getting you out of office and replacing you with someone who will never ask that question again. They will just do whatever it takes to get the job done. And until that day, 100% of our energy will be spent making your life a living hell. There is nothing wrong with opposing federal programs such as a federal job guarantee or universal health care or anything else. But if you oppose them because of economics, because they are too expensive, because they will raise our taxes in order to pay for them, because they will cause hyperinflation, MMT demonstrates that that is an invalid argument. So perhaps it is time that you either reconsider your opposition or make a more honest argument for your opposition. great things are possible. They're possible now. They are already possible. They have always been possible. But they will never happen until we stand up and demand it. But we will not stand up and demand it until we believe it is possible. MMT demonstrates that it is possible. MMT is non-fiction economics. Learning MMT will not stop the corrupt from doing bad things. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from stopping us from doing good things. That's it. Thank you.